actually, George Lakoff and Bob Samuels were also with us yesterday at the UC Santa Barbara teach-in, where we had 10 hours to have this conversation, not 2 hours. Bob Samuels has been the president of the University Council for the American Federation of Teachers. For 6 years, he has written extensively on academic labor issues and teaches writing here at UCLA. Please welcome Bob Samuels.
I was going to start off by saying I support George's initiative, and he'll be talking about that, and we're going to try to work with him and try to get the unions involved. And also, just want to talk about a couple things going on campus. Last week, you lost your turn, so you're gone. No, you have to. You're next. So last week we met with the chancellor. We had a group of students and faculty and union members, and we talked to the chancellor about working together as a unified group to go to Sacramento to lobby together. And this hasn't really been done that much, but we wanted to ask him what kind of university are we lobbying for? Because our concern is they're going to raise student fees and they're going to deliver less at this campus. Already we're seeing a lot of changes, right? They talked about the suspension of tutors. We lost last year the GE seminar class. This year they have sent layoff notices to 67 long-term lecturers, and they're talking about potentially suspending all writing classes, getting rid of the writing requirement, getting rid of all language requirements, and actually getting rid of all undergraduate requirements or suspending them on a temporary basis. And we think this is an incredible threat to the university. And so the unions have gotten together with the faculty and the students. We've come up with a list of demands. Most of these are supported by the whole group. And there's 5 demands, and I'll just tell you them, and I'm going to just go over them very quickly. The first demand is no fee hikes. Our argument is what should happen is the president, Mark Yudof, UC president, should not have come up right now with the fee increases. He should have forced the governor to make an agreement. Right now, the legislative analysts said if we raise fee increases, they are not going to suggest restoring our funding. We've already played our hand. It was a horrible move. We think that the fee increases should be delayed. We think that there should be an audit of the UC system. We should see where the undergraduate money is going, and we should look at if there's other cost savings. So one thing I passed out was an alternative budget that we've put together, some of the unions, and it's different ways of saving money on the campus. Because on some level, instead of seeing this radical, drastic cut, we see this as potentially a short-term loss of state funds, but there's other funds in the system. And it's a question of, are we willing to share the funds, right? The medical centers make hundreds of millions of dollars a year. If we just simply tax them 5 to 7%, we would not have to do the furloughs, okay? We have research grants. We have profit-generating parts of the university. A lot of them are not even getting furloughs. We should tax them and share the revenue. If we're really a community, if we're really one university, one campus, we should be able to share resources. Now, President Yudof has said publicly that the money in the UC system is all restricted. Well, courts have said that's not true. We've had arbitration cases. They say the money in the UC system is mostly only restricted by UC's priorities. So we think this is not so much a crisis, a budget crisis, but it's a crisis in leadership.
Yeah.
We also feel strongly that no one making less than $40,000 a year should be furloughed. I mean, what's happening? The wealthiest faculty and administrators in the system have bought themselves out of the furlough system. The people who make $800,000 a year, $1 million a year, are not going to get furloughed, right? The medical centers are not going to get furloughed. They're able to come up with their savings some other way. We think it's totally unfair. And so we think what they should do is immediately stop the furloughs for people making less than $40,000. Now, the next thing that we're concerned, of course, is about what's going on with the layoffs and the layoff notices. We think the layoff notices should be taken back. We think that the university has to really look at what kind of quality education do they want to present. What's going to happen if UC next year has no foreign language classes, has no writing classes? what kind of reputation? What's going to happen to the accreditation? Do you know to go to a lot of medical schools and law schools, you have to show in your transcript that you took writing classes and language classes? What's going to happen to the students if we stop holding those classes? Or what's going to happen if we decide you have to take them on your own in summer school or online or during or at community colleges? You're going to have to pay extra, and once again, you're going to get less. And so we want to fight that whole system. A big concern is budget transparency. We feel that the budget has not been transparent, especially when President Yudof said at the Regents meeting, he said 3 very contradictory things. He said, A, we have no reserves. There's no hidden bank. Then he said, next, our reserves are down 30%. Right? And then finally he said, we have to save our reserves for the future because we don't know what's going to happen. Right? So the total UC budget, operating budget this year was $20 billion. $800 million got cut by the state. That's 3%. We're seeing 20%, 25% cuts. Why is that happening? It's happening because we're not sharing the money across the units. There's not a sense of shared sacrifice. They're pitting one side against the other. Now, other major concern is union busting. My particular union, UCAFT, which I'm the system-wide president of, we represent lecturers and librarians in the UC system. Well, the university, first of all, told the lecturers that they can't be part of the furlough system because you can't take furloughs on instructional days, and we're essentially instructors. Then Yudof came out and attacked us publicly for not accepting the unions. And then a message was sent around to the different departments saying you're going to have to lay off lecturers because they refuse to accept the furloughs. Well, it didn't happen, and this is a form of union busting. The university is spending literally millions of dollars on law firms, outside law firms, and public relations firms to bust the unions because they want to have free reign of how they control things. One final thing. So people always say, okay, if we're not in this incredible situation, why did he declare a fiscal emergency? Well, I think there's several reasons, but the first reason is once Yudof declared a fiscal emergency, which, by the way, he didn't have to prove in any way, he got executive powers, right? He could do whatever he wants. There's a suspension of shared governance. I don't care what you heard before about the academic assembly, the system-wide. There has been a suspension of shared governance. Decisions are being made left and right. No one knows who's making those decisions. There's task force. No one knows who's on the task force, what's their mission. There's all this restructuring going on, and the faculty are not involved. And so we are fighting for shared governance and budget transparency. And we're asking for an audit of the UC system, a financial audit either by the state legislature or by some third-party audit, because we want to know where the money is going and why it's not going to education. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bob Samuels. Our next speaker is George Lakoff. George Lakoff is one of the world's best-known linguists and cognitive scientists. He has advised hundreds of advocacy groups as well as congressional leaders and political candidates throughout the country. Please welcome George Lakoff.
Thank you all for coming and for inviting me. First, if you have a pencil and paper, take it out now. I want you to write down something very short. Okay? Very short. It's CA for California, one word, CAMajorityRule.com. I'll tell you what that means in a minute. CAMajorityRule.com. Please write it down. Last spring, I was invited by these a dozen state senators, Democratic state senators, to come to Sacramento because they were having certain problems. And I spoke to them. I never saw such a dispirited group of political leaders in my life, especially since they were in the majority. And what they told me was they happened to be in the majority, but they had no power. None. They couldn't do anything. And the reason was the so-called two-thirds rules. Now, as a linguist, you might think that if a majority is democratic, a two-thirds or supermajority is more democratic. The opposite is true. Because 1/3 plus 1 can overrule any majority. It's really minority rule. And that's what they were facing every single day. They, and most Californians don't know this. This is the only state in the union where the legislature on both budget and on revenue is governed by minority rule. It is the least Democratic legislature in the country. The only one that's fully anti-democratic. Did you know that before? Most people in the state do not.